We will start the third session of the open hearing. May I remind deputations and individuals the way to use the earpiece and the microphone. Channel 0 is the floor. Channel 1, Cantonese. Channel 2, English. And Channel 3, Putonghua. Every individual will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The timer will warn you when the time is up. And if you would like to provide a written submission, please do so and leave it at the Secretariat of the Council. May I remind members present to give their comments that when they make comments, they are not protected by the protection and privileges under the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance, and the same applies to the written submissions. And may I remind members of the public attending this meeting that there is guidance. There is a note for members of the public attending meetings in conference rooms, observing meetings in public galleries in the electoral complex. The note has been attached to the invitation sent by the Secretary to you, and there is also a copy tabled. For members in the public gallery, you may approach our Secretariat staff for a copy. And let me state some house rules of the public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to allow members and government officials to have public comments. And the public hearing is divided into 3 parts. The first is for the public to state their views, and second is to allow government officials to give an overall response to views expressed by members of the public, and the last part will be for members to ask questions. I have to point out that to ensure orderly conduct of the meeting in accordance with the rules of procedure, members can only speak when I invite you to do so. And when members of the public are speaking, there can be no dialogue between them and government officials, and please take note of that. And I note that in previous public hearings, individual members might give their outstanding speaking time to designated members of the public here, and I will not allow this because it will mean that some members of the public will have more time to speak than others, and this is not fair. And I will direct members of the public to give written submissions, and if members cannot use up time allocated to them, they can conclude their remarks earlier and leave the time for other members to speak. And may I draw members' attention to ROP 87. The chairman can direct anyone that is engaged in disorderly behavior or that is unlikely to engage in disorderly conduct to leave the chamber at once. So you must strictly adhere to this, and for details please refer to the notes. And to ensure that the meeting can be conducted in an orderly manner, I can ask anyone who do not obey order to leave without prior notice or warning. All right. I will now invite deputations or individuals to speak, and you have each up to 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Zhu Hokhoi. Thank you, Chairman. I support local legislation for the national anthem law. Just like the national flag and national anthem, the national emblem, the national emblem is a symbol of the country, and it's not just for the nationals of that country. All other people should respect such symbols. In Hong Kong, we have an ordinance to uphold the dignity of the national flag and national emblem. So it is understandable that we have a similar piece of legislation to protect the national anthem. And not all provisions in the bill have criminal sanctions, and the threshold for breaking the law are very high. Unless you are posing a deliberate challenge to the bill, you won't be caught inadvertently. So we should view the bill in a positive manner. We should express our views in a peaceful and calm manner. For the younger generation in particular, they should adopt a more far-sighted view, and they should understand the spirit behind the bill. Your personal freedom cannot undermine the interests of the country. Any remarks or behavior that insult the country should not be tolerated. Every national in a country should respect the national anthem, and therefore I support the local legislation. Thank you, Mr. Hong Ling Fai. Thank you. I'm from the Civic Party, Hong Ling Fai. I'm also a secondary school teacher. I'd like to explain why we want the government to withdraw this draconian law from the educational perspective. Some people may think that in schools we do not teach the national anthem. This is exactly the opposite. We are already doing so. And all along, the Education Bureau has got guidelines for schools to play the national anthem and to raise the national flag on suitable occasions, such as commencement ceremonies and sports days. So there are sufficient guidelines as already. And why are teachers have so much reservations when it comes to the enactment of the law? Now, under Article 136 of the Basic Law, it is stated clearly that education is entirely a matter for the SAR. The legislation will directly translate or move the requirements from the mainland to the education sector. The Secretary for Education will direct us to teach the national anthem. So Beijing officials are directing local education officials to direct schools to carry out some orders from Beijing. Some may say that there aren't penalties in the bill, and the threshold for a successful prosecution is very high. But from the educational point of view, if we do not follow the order from the Education Bureau, the highest penalty can be losing their teacher qualification and losing the job. Although in this bill, we do not see any consequence for not complying with the relevant provision, there is a threat posed to teachers, so it is unacceptable. Using a certain legal provision to direct the schools to do certain things should be on matters such as protecting rights of students, protecting the rights of children to education, so on and so forth. I can't see how directing schools to teach the education anthem is an important right, because under the freedom of expression, you should be given a choice as to whether you sing or do not sing the national anthem. This is against the Bill of Rights, and you are also threatening teachers and also threatening students' opportunity to education. So the Civic Party would want the bill to be withdrawn. Thank you. Mr. Yip Man Ben, thank you. I am a district councillor of Tuen Mun. My position is to support the early enactment of the national anthem bill by the LegCo ASAP, because the national anthem is a symbol of the country. The NPCSC adopted the national anthem law into Annex 3 to the Basic Law, and for national laws to be applied locally, it must be by way of either promulgation or legislation. And therefore, we have a legislative and constitutional duty to complete the legislation in Hong Kong. And I think it is desirable for the bill to be passed, because The national anthem symbolizes the country. It can bring a sense of belonging to the people of Hong Kong. We have had many occasions when people did not respect or even insult the country. Many people, including myself, who were saddened by such events. I very much hope that with enactment of the bill, all such offences can be prosecuted. We can have a basis for enforcing the law. I have read the details of the bill. There is nothing in it to restrict the daily behavior of the community. It will only target a deliberate move to challenge the national anthem. I believe no one will do so deliberately in Hong Kong, so there is no question of people being inadvertently caught by the bill. Most people in Hong Kong respect the country as well as the national anthem. In primary, secondary schools, you sing your school song and also and maybe hymns if it is a Christian school. So no matter how much understanding you have the school song or whether you like it is melody or not, you have the duty and the emotional requirement to sing your school song properly. If we use the same token to understand the same mentality to understand the bill, it's just the same. We being a part of China, it is natural for us to sing the national anthem. And I'm sure as legislators, you have a very deep feeling for this. When you take the oath, you have to go through a very solemn and serious ceremony before you can be legislators, and there were incidents that cause people who do not respect the national anthem to reflect on. So it is most appropriate for the national anthem to be played when you take the oath to become legislators. So I support the enactment of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Yip. Next, Mr. Lam. If I could say this to Mr. Lam, your written submission has been received. You may now take 3 minutes to give your views. Thank you. Thank you. For the national anthem and national flag, they are the symbols of our country, represents the country's sovereignty. And I believe the general public has great respect for the symbol of the country. Now we need to defend the dignity of our country. And so it's reasonable to legislate for punishing insulting behavior of the national anthem. This is not unique in Hong Kong. In Japan, Germany, and other countries, they also have legislation to protect the national anthem or national symbol. Now in Hong Kong, as I mentioned, the national anthem law of the mainland is included in Annex 3 to the Basic Law. So the SARG has the duty to either promulgate the national law or enact a piece of local legislation to implement the national law. Now, we already have the national flag and national emblem ordinance. So the approach is to enact a piece of local legislation. So this time, with the national anthem, if we go for local legislation, that's in keeping with the actual circumstances in Hong Kong too. Some express worries that this bill would undermine the freedom of speech in Hong Kong. But I think many members, government officials, or scholars have said time and again that freedom of speech is not absolute. There has to be restrictions. This is particularly the case if the freedom of speech affects public order. Now, can we therefore impose restrictions on freedom of speech for, say, public order reasons? Now, if the general public agrees defending the national flag is in line with our interest, what about publicly and intentionally insulting the national anthem? So that's an act under the definition of public order. So for the same arguments, that is to defend the dignity of the national anthem and the legitimate interests and rights of the people, I support legislating for the national anthem law. And then in the bill, it stated clearly that there must be an intent and it must be done publicly before an act is considered an offense. So that's why I'm in support of the national anthem bill. Next, Mr. Yutakpo, I'm from the Civic Party and Yao Chim Hong District Council. Today we have several representatives from the Civic Party. Hong Ling Fai spoke on education, and then Chan Tang will also give other views. I don't know how public hearings are conducted. It's good that this morning I got up early and I was following online the public hearing, and then it actually started at 9 a.m. And most people actually wouldn't know that they could come and give their views on the national anthem as a member of the public at public hearings. Now this morning, of course, many in the public hearing said that they would like to support the early passage of the national anthem bill. So it's not just government officials who are like gramophones, even deputations and individuals are like that. But the government wouldn't even do public consultation, so you're denying the people the opportunity to be even a gramophone records. So if you're so confident in this bill, why wouldn't you do public consultation now? Mr. Ip of the Tuen Mun District Council has just left. I wonder if there's any public consultation with the Tuen Mun District Council. But why didn't you do any public consultation if you're so confident about it? And you can garner more support for the bill. And then some say that it's a matter of standard for people to respect national anthem, so there would be no dissent in the community. Now this is the third session of the public hearing. 64 people have spoken. Each person has about 3 minutes, so altogether 188 minutes. 188 minutes. Would that be enough to represent the views of all 7 million people in Hong Kong? I don't know. But the government is saying firmly that there's nothing wrong with the national anthem bill. There is public support, but then you wouldn't do public consultation, but rather you would go through the public hearing of this council and consider the job done. Now, of course, there were only special meetings at the for the Constitutional Affairs panel, and there were also public hearings held by the panel, and you could say that's a form of public consultation. But it was then was the outline. But now in the bill we see more details. That is, at oath-taking ceremonies, the national anthem has to be played. No one knew about it then. And if the bill is passed into law, the public may not know about the details, and they won't know if they have breached the law. And then there's also mentioned that some national members were disqualified because they did not respect or they did not know about such protocols. But there are also SCORE representatives who said that the students may be disqualified, or did they say something like they will be disqualified? Your time is up. Next, please. Mr. Chang Tak Hong. Thank you. I'm the Eastern District Councillor. I'm also from the Civic Party. Now, in line with the spirit of common law, if there are criminal offences involved in the bill, then everything must be set out clearly so the public know exactly how to observe the law. But then in the national anthem bill, is rather vague. For example, distorting or distorted or disrespectful way of insulting the national dignity or anthem, there is not a specific definition. On many occasions, the Civic Party asked how the law enforcement agency would interpret Clause 7 of the bill. The Civic Party even asked a question at the Bills Committee, but the government said it's up to the court to make a decision. I understand that some others have also asked the Bureau of the same question, but then the Bureau's response is that is in accordance. It's just they're just copying the national anthem law and to the bill. So you won't even let legislature know what sort of bill they are going to enact, then how can the court make the right decision? Would there be chilling effect? That is, the public may have to wait a long time for lengthy court procedures before the public know whether they have breached the law. And then clause 7, bracket 7 of the bill states that proceedings may only be commenced for an offence at the end of the period of 1 year after the date on which the offence is discovered by the police, or at the end of the period of 2 years after the date on which the offence is committed. But the explanation is given that there are many people will be involved in major event, so that means this will become a tool for mass prosecution of dissidents. And is that in line with the spirit of the laws of Hong Kong? Now, if a country loves its people, cares for its people, do you think there's need for such restrictions to regulate patriotism? Now, if at the Chinese football match a few years back, Chinese officials mocked Hong Kong's culture, and and then that's why soccer fans were so against the national anthem. Now, there was the official media on the mainland that criticized us that you should ask them to shut up first. Next. Hui Po Chan. I support the legislation for the national anthem law. We have seen uncivilized behavior. And in previous major soccer matches in Hong Kong, now on the mainland, national anthem law was promulgated in 2017. Hong Kong has the duty and obligation to legislate for the national anthem law, so as to defend national sovereignty and dignity. Now, through legislation, we can stop provocative acts against the national anthem. National anthem is the soul of a country. It's something we should respect. The national anthem is something we will stand solemnly to, and national anthem is something that every modern country has. So as national, we have a duty and obligation to support the national anthem. I am all for legislating for the national anthem to defend national dignity and sovereignty. Next, Mr. Chiu Sik Ho. Yeah, thank you. I'm from the Liberal Party Youth Corp. Chiu Sik Ho. We support the national anthem bill. We believe the national anthem should be treated the same as the national flag. It should be respected by the people because they're both symbols of national sovereignty. National flags and national anthems also part of international practices to defend them. And some say that with the national anthem bill, then it will become a tool for cracking down on dissidents and so on. But we find that regrettable because this is all fabricated. Freedom is not absolute. We can't use the name. You can't insult the country in the name of freedom. There have to be protocols and codes. For example, some people act in a way to insult the national flag, and that affects Hong Kong's international image, and also insults the country. Now, Hong Kong practices one country, two systems. It's very important, like it's important to ensure territorial integrity. We already have national flag and the national emblem ordinance, so we should also have ordinance on national anthem. We shouldn't allow people to insult the national anthem. We also support including national anthem education in private and primary and secondary school education. Now, Hong Kong is an integral part of China, so we should teach children from a young age to sing the national anthem is only an obligation, and that will also enhance the sense of identity, of national identity, that is. Now, the government should provide more teaching support and resources, and there should be more discussion with education scholars, so that would be the right way to teach a national anthem. And then students would have the best learning experience. We want to see the early legislation for national anthem law. Thank you. Next, Ms. Lee Yu-sum. I'm from the Civic Party. Lee Yu-sum. Now, this bill will prevent people from expressing their political views, and the Civic Party is very much concerned about it. Now, the freedom of speech is protected by the basic law. If the government disregards it and tries to push through this bill, the Civic Party is staunchly against it. Now, in the preamble of the bill, that includes words used for ideology and propaganda. For example, it said that this is to enhance national citizen awareness and to promote patriotism. That's about ideology. Now, should a judge make ruling on basis of the ordinance or the preamble? Because there's ideology in the preamble. So this is the mainland's practice, and are you trying to bring it into Hong Kong, or legislating for ideology? So is it just because you want to please Beijing, you don't mind making this a tool for regulating our ideology? And on the mainland, people could be punished for not agreeing with certain ideology. The national anthem says also that the sexual education must direct that national anthem be made part of the primary and secondary education. But that is the mainland model of education. It's not what we want in Hong Kong. That is an international model that embraces pluralism. And then students may no longer have critical thinking, this is an important quality for them. Now, of course, at the early stage of the reunification, there's national flag and national emblem ordinance enacted, but then there's not a preamble on ideology in that ordinance. How come we're not following the same practice? Because the national flag and national emblem ordinance was also enacted to give play to the national law in Annex 3. So how come you're starting a new approach? This is that is, you are using the preamble to promote ideology. This is the first time ever for this to be done in a bill. The executive said that it's a different scenario, that's why you're doing it differently. But then you did not provide the full discussion records on the legislation for the national flag and national anthem. Are you now blatantly undermining one country, two systems? The national anthem should include just the lyrics and the score. Your time is up. Next, Mr. Wong Wai Kin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am speaking in support of the early passage of the National Anthem Bill, so Hong Kong will fulfill its constitutional obligation. Now we have to legislate for the National Anthem law, because the law is already in Annex 3 of the Basic Law. And Hong Kong, under the principle of one country, two systems, has the constitutional duty to legislate for the National Anthem law, and I don't think you can argue that in terms of law. And also, we talk about reasons. Now, on how we define what is disrespectful act against the national anthem, and what that's also definition on intent on so all the definitions are clear. They're not vague. And for any law-abiding citizen in Hong Kong who has no intention to be disrespectful to the national anthem, he or she has nothing to worry about. But then, of course, there are others who keep trying to find loopholes. Then after the enactment of the bill, they will see how they could exploit the loopholes, and so they could insult the national anthem without falling foul of the law. Well, I'm really worried about that. National anthem is a symbol of national dignity. We should respect it. Even if we consider ourselves a global citizen, that is, apart from our own national anthem, we should also respect other national anthems. So if we respect the national anthems of other countries, how come we have so many questions about our own national anthem? I think, there's an easy way to look at the legislative exercise. It's just that we need to set the boundaries, clear boundaries in the community. That is, what is the right thing to do at the right occasion. Thank you. Next, Ms. Chin Chi-ying. Thank you. I would like to express my support for the early passage of the National Anthem Bill.
Well, the national anthem is a symbol which represents the country. We do need to legislate for the national anthem to protect the national anthem. There are sayings that this law will undermine people's freedom. You don't have to worry about this because it's enshrined in the basic law that you have freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. The proposal under the bill targets acts done openly and intentionally to insult or disrespect the national anthem. It's actually difficult for ordinary citizens to break the law. So I support the legislation and it should be done as soon as possible. Thank you, Ms. Chin. Next, Mr. Lai Wei-tong. Thank you. I think I'm here to speak not to support or oppose to the legislation. I'm here to express the views of the general public, and I ask the government to think twice and to tread very carefully. Under the spirit of the national anthem, well, it only provides guidelines in terms of etiquette and protocol. Well, according to the preamble, it says that this bill is to ensure that people will respect the national anthem. It is to preserve the dignity of it, and it is to enhance the citizens' awareness, etc. Imposing criminal sanction will not achieve these purposes. You can only love your country if you feel it in the bottom of your heart. Otherwise, it will be superficial. When it comes to actual operation, it will be difficult to actually enforce the law. In a lot of circumstances, say for example, football fans booing the national anthem, and the playing and singing of the national anthem deviates from the standard score. Well, can you actually read the standard score and the simplified score of the national anthem? If not, then it's very easy for you to deviate from the standard. It will be very difficult, of course, for law enforcement agencies to enforce the law. And this will become a tool for those in power to suppress people with a dissenting view. We have to be mindful of the hazards and threats it brings. The legislation of the national anthem will pave the way to destroy our freedom. And now it says that only in designated official occasions that the national anthem will be played. But you can't rule out the possibility that the list will be expanded. Say, for example, religious occasions. Say, for example, religious bodies on the mainland will have to follow the national policy, will have to sing and play the national anthem. It may happen in Hong Kong, so you can't deny the fact that there is always a threat that the same will be imposed in Hong Kong. There are also criminal sanctions in the bill. This may bring irreversible damage to Hong Kong and will also affect Hong Kong's sustainable development. Hong Kong may become a secondary or even more inferior economic cities. I do believe that the already bad situation will become worse. The government should think twice. People should be very careful when they deal with the legislation of the national anthem. Thank you. Next, Ms. Hong Hai-Kei. Good afternoon. I myself support the legislation. In 2017, there was a promulgation of the national anthem law on the mainland. I believe that the majority of people will understand the meaning of the national anthem. And it's not just China. In a lot of other countries, there is legislation for the national anthem. I don't understand why people will oppose to it for the sake of it. I do think that everything is very clear. The bill is clear. The provisions are clear. Well, the provisions are about the playing and singing and the etiquette and the inclusion of the same in our education. Well, I don't understand why so many people would like to distort the true nature of the national anthem and oppose it for the sake of opposing. On a number of occasions, legislators openly insult the national anthem in official ceremonies. I think that it is really disrespectful to the national anthem and the country. Now we will have the law. A lot of these situations can be prevented. So I ask for legislation for the national anthem to regulate the use of the national anthem and also to preserve the dignity of the national anthem in order to reflect Hong Kong's people's wish to be patriotic. Next, Mr. Lam Wang Git. I support the legislation for the national anthem law. So far, there is no legislation to protect the national anthem. In recent times, we have seen occasions when the national anthem was distorted and disrespected. We do need this bill. The law specifies that the national anthem should be respected. And there are also criminal sanctions. This will prevent reoccurrence of similar incidents. These criminal sanctions only target acts committed publicly and intentionally. If you are law-abiding, then you don't have to worry too much. I think the bill should be passed as soon as possible so that the national anthem will be protected and respected in Hong Kong. Next, Mr. Loy Kai. Hong Kong Human Rights Monitor comes to speak in this public hearing. We think that the ICCPR relevant provisions should be taken into account. In particular, those that relate to protection of freedom of expression. The ICCPR was signified under Article 39 of the Basic Law. Let's refer to the ICCPR Article 19. It specifically says that freedom of expression and freedom of speech should be protected. This means that you can choose your own ways to express yourself. It may be the way you like, but still, it has to be protected. Someone else will say that the convention also says that there may be limitations And such expression is not absolute, and they've even cited certain CFA cases. I'd like to say that a lot of them don't understand. Well, it may not be absolute, but it cannot be limited at will or arbitrarily. In a democratic society, do you really have to limit one's way when they express their views relating to the national anthem? There is no such law in a lot of other jurisdictions. Even if they have similar laws, there is no criminal sanction. If we impose heavy penalties in Hong Kong, then it contradicts the requirements under the International Convention. And that is one very important point. The convention talks about proportionality. Well, if it is necessary to interfere with the expression, then it has to be done in a minimum way. Well, if it's about etiquette, then just talk about the etiquette. There is no need to impose criminal penalty. And if you think that, well, penalty is necessary, then you have to be as lenient as possible, because you don't want to undermine Hong Kong's freedom of expression. There is also another important principle in Ng Kong Siu case. Sorry, your time is up. You need to supplement in a written form. Next, Mr. Yong Tek Sang. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just an ordinary citizen, but I have a lot of feelings about this. Well, I've been to different countries. Well, in the US, there is this Spangled Banner. In Germany, there is Song of the Germans. In the UK, God Save the Queen. In Australia, Advance Australia Fair. Well, these are the national anthems of these countries. What is the practice in these countries? In the UK, there is a citizenship test. You will need to learn the UK's national anthem. And in Florida, there are some schools who refuse to have the Pledge of Allegiance, and they were prosecuted by the state police. And there is also another high school that has exposed an African students who refuses to pledge allegiance to the United States. And there is also another case in Australia. A kid who refused to sing the national anthem was detained. When you talk about insulting the national anthem, I think it has gone beyond freedom of religion and freedom of expression. Well, there are legal grounds supporting this bill. We have people from different sectors, different groups. I think that it is representative enough of the general public. Well, if you started me on football games, then I wouldn't be able to stop. Some people say that because of the national media, this and that, and something happened. But if you look around the world, there is no citizen of any other country that would boo their own national anthem or the national anthem of another country. Recently, a friend of mine who is an expatriate asked me why Hong Kong people would boo their own national anthem. I got really embarrassed because I did not know how to reply. I do think this is about basic respect. Someone talk about human rights conventions. Well, there are lots of overseas cases, some of them detained, some of them arrested, exposed. So I support the legislation of the national anthem. Next, Mr. Mui Xiaofeng. We are a youth group. From time to time, we have organized international exchange sessions. Recently, we have been to Malaysia. There was an activity. I was in attendance to an officiating ceremony. The organization was an NGO. Before the officiating ceremony, the national anthem was played. We had with us about 30 students. 30 students, including the leader, respected the national anthem played. We did not make any noise or move. We asked our youngsters, why can't you respect your country's national anthem? You respect other countries' national anthem. Why can't you respect your own? That is very difficult to answer. Well, if you ask me whether some of the provisions are too draconian, I don't know. But we are a youth group. We communicate with youngsters. We organized a debate. One of the topic was about school regulations. But we're talking about primary school students. They said, why should they be afraid of school rules? Because they are good students. Good students will never be afraid of rules. Is our national anthem. If you have a clear conscience, you don't have to be afraid. Look at this piece of blank paper. If you don't draw on it, then it's fine. But if you violently tear it in half, then the paper will be torn in half. Next, Miss Wang Hoyong. Good afternoon, everyone. I speak on behalf of Progressive Lawyers Group. First of all, we would ask you to respect expression of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of expression. There should not be any limitations, and if this is necessary to impose limitations, these limitations should be kept to a minimum, and they should be clear. And it's not the case, as someone has put it, that all the provisions are clear. The provisions are ambiguous, and some of them are not even in line with the legislative principle. Well, first, I would like to talk about the offense of insulting behavior. You can see that it is a very wide scope. Let's look at the national flag and national emblem law. Well, there are specific conducts that constitute such behavior. Say, for example, burning of the flag. But if you refer to a similar provision in this bill, you see that there are no such instances. Let me give you an example. If there is a peaceful demonstration taking place in Victoria Park, and during such an occasion, someone plays the national anthem, at the same time protesters continue to chant the slogan "and one party rule." Does it constitute an offense of insulting behavior? Well, if someone says under his personal account of the social media that says, well, I don't think the national anthem is a good song, and when others have given likes or hearts, does it mean that they have insulted the national anthem? Well, there is another element in there. It says publicly, but what constitutes publicly? It is unclear. If a group of people in high spirits eat in a Tai Pai Tong, and one of them said, "Oh, I think that the national anthem is bad." Does it mean that it is an act done publicly? If you refer to articles clauses 6 and 8 together. If someone uses the lyrics or score in a trademark or commercial advertisement and makes people think that it is part of the national anthem, then it is an offense. Let me give you an example. A creative company that says in an advertisement, rise up, you don't want to be a slave, and use it as a slogan in merchandise, say t-shirt or cups. Does it constitute an offense? So this is an across-the-board limitation. This will stifle the development of the creative industry. It may also catch people inadvertently. So I ask the administration to clarify and dispel such concerns. Next, Mr. Tam Dak-ji. We are people power. We are opposed to any legislation that suppress our freedom of expression and speech.
Let me respond to the remarks of some deputations. You do not try the law, and a good student need no fear for school rules. Well, you can ask LP members who worry about the fugitive offenders ordinance. And Trump would use such examination to harm us. And Mr. Lo Yokai, I'd like to respond to you about against human rights. In fact, it is a fact in China. And I think it's already a wide-known fact that there is infringement of human rights in the mainland. Well, I wanted to sing a song today, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to sing it openly. I'm going to sing this rubbish national anthem. Now, this Communist Party, which is in power, is using this an ideology to unite its people. It is trying to address a crisis, and it is enacting the national anthem law everywhere in the country. This is not about defending the country's dignity. Certain woman talked about the national anthem being the biggest emblem of the country. No, I think the people of this country should be the masters of this country. The government should represent the interests of the people, and it all boils down to ensuring the liberty and freedoms of people concerned. Even Li Keqiang would not know this, and even if he does, he doesn't know how to practice it. Well, if you make fun of the government, you want to overturn the government. Now, if a government can tolerate such behavior, then it will be qualified to be loved by its people, and then it will be able to ask people to respect the national law. However, the government is bullying its people. Well, when football matches spectacular, spectators do not respect the law. Now, in fact, national anthem is not the biggest representative of the government. The CCP is ridiculous. Now, this national anthem bill is not to show that you are patriotic. It's just that you are pandering to the wish of the authorities. In fact, you have enough votes to pass the bill, and then you can claim a prize from the Beijing authorities. Now, you're not being patriotic. You are supporting power that are killers. It's just like the woman who spoke at the National People's Congress a few days ago. Your time is up. Come in fine. I'm from the New People's Party. I support the early implementation of the bill as said by many members. We have to legislate to implement the bill because it is already in Annex 3 of the Basic Law. Under one country, two systems. This government has the obligation to legislate on it. Some speakers talked about freedom of expression and that the bill is meant to suppress people's opinions. In fact, there are different comments made today. Some are being very reasonable, and some are just here to vent their emotions. In fact, the national anthem represents PRC. It doesn't represent the CCP or the Chinese leadership. we have to enact the bill so as to defend the dignity of the country. Even if you don't like this ruling party, you don't like the state leader, you can express your views, but that doesn't mean that you can insult the country. So the national anthem is about the country, it's not about a certain party or a certain state leader. And whether it is about ideology, as I said, patriotism is an ideology, but loving the country is not. Patriotism is about using this excuse to do something that is not really good. As what is happening in New Zealand is a good example. All countries require the nationals and citizens to love their country. This is the most basic or minimum requirement. So we should have the minimum, at least a minimum respect for the national anthem. This is very reasonable. As for whether people will break the law inadvertently, well, the government has the duty to legislate locally because of the basic law. And Hong Kong, people in Hong Kong also have this responsibility. Professionals from the legal sector have voiced their concerns. The government officials may need to reconsider some of the terms in the bill, the intention and deliberate, so on and so forth. They should explain to the public the definition of these terms. We have the common law system practice in Hong Kong. It is impossible to provide exhaustive lists of offences. But I believe we all have confidence in the rule of law and the judiciary in Hong Kong, so there shouldn't be too many problems. I urge the administration to enact the bill as soon as possible. Thank you. That ends the time for deputations to speak. I invite the Secretary to provide a succinct and overall reply to the comments made. Thank you, Chairman. I thank 20 deputations and individuals for telling us their opinions. My response covers two main areas. First, because this is a national law, we have to legislate to locally. This is because of the one country, two systems principle. And the country has practices a socialism. Hong Kong practices capitalism. The fact that we do not practice socialism in Hong Kong is because of one country, two systems. Some deputations call patriotism an ideology. Frankly speaking, a notion for the country and patriotism, I think just the same in other countries. I do not see any objection from nationals of other countries. Some deputations talked about teaching the national anthem in primary and secondary schools. This arrangement is again honoring the spirit of one country, two systems. Now, in the basic law, we are free to formulate our own educational policy. Secondly, we have to apply national laws in Hong Kong by means of legislation. So through the Secretary for Education, directions will be given to primary and secondary schools for the provisions to be implemented. This is all because of the one country, two systems principle. Some deputations talked about restrictions on freedom of expression. I already addressed that in a previous session. I will not repeat my points. As for the time limit for prosecution, please don't think that we have any conspiracy. It is just a practical arrangement. We have to strike a balance between effective enforcement and a prosecution within a reasonable period of time. So the prosecution time will be 1 year after the date on which the offense is discovered or comes to the notice or 2 years after the date on which the offense is committed, whichever is the earlier. We have got a similar extension of prosecution time to over 6 months in other pieces of legislation. Now, if we look at the common law system and our own laws, we have the term insult in many pieces of legislation, and no statutory definition has been provided. The word is to be construed in its usual sense. However, for the sake of clarity, we have provided a definition for insult. So for the purpose of the bill, it is about insulting the dignity or undermine the dignity of the national anthem as a symbol and sign of the PRC. So we have given due regard to the legislative intent as well as the legal system in Hong Kong. Thank you. Now, the last part of this session is questions from members. 5 have already indicated their intention to speak. Anyone more? If not, I draw a line after that. Each member will have up to 2 minutes. Questions and answers included. Mr. Ronnie Chen, thank you. Yes, I have sat through 3 sessions or 3 parts of this morning. Some deputations said that it's not just about respect for our own national anthem. We should also respect national anthems of other countries. I think that has brought out an important point. Some deputations talked about freedom of expression. In fact, some of them have resorted to a rather vulgar language to attack other members. So this is some full display of freedom of expression. In fact, most people are law-abiding. Still, we need laws to ensure the people, the very few people who break the law can be penalized. We should not say that because most people are law-abiding, we don't need laws and we don't need the national anthem bill. I think we all understand this point. The Secretary said that the bill has struck a balance. It has taken reference from the national anthem law and has also taken care of the local circumstances. Article 15 of the national law said about deliberately altering, and clause 7 here also talks about intention with intent. And it's also said that except as provided under subsection 3 or 4, a person does not commit offense under this section by publishing blah, blah, blah. So I think this has already taken care of the worries of some people out there that is breaking the law unintentionally or inadvertently. Can the Secretary please clarify? Yes. We have particularly emphasized the 3 points: publicly and intentionally. I think we can discuss this on Monday. And if you wish for a reply from the Secretary, do leave time for him to do so. Mr. Coffin. Thank you. I have also sat through several sessions. I think most deputations are concerned about the definition of intentionally or intent, so on and so forth. The NFNEO was enacted more than 20 years ago, and I think it can serve as a good reference. Secretary, the NFNEO has been implemented for 22 years. I have called the police once because of an issue related to the national flag. From prosecution to trial, it was very stringent. The mens rea had to be proved. That certain person in an open forum did something to insult the national flag with the whole process videotaped. So the whole prosecution process was very stringent. So I hope the Secretary can elaborate on this to address some rumors and also deliberate scaring. Well, I think we're talking about deliberately insulting the national flag. Of course, we have got some case laws under the NFNEO, but not too numerous. In 1999, the case between the government and Mkong Shiu provided a very clear ruling from the CFA. And for the penalties, we have taken reference from those in the NFNEO. Thank you. Mr. Jeremy Tam, I think one speaker said that if a student insulted the national anthem in school, perhaps out of mischief, then it should be handled by the school. That was a suggestion from one of the speakers. Now, if a school insists on calling the police, I'd like to know whether the police will then handle the case. Secretary, there are 2 points to this question. Usually, in a school scenario, that is in primary or secondary school, it is not really a public occasion. What if the behavior has been videotaped and put to the internet? So usually the case will be handled by the school who are professional educators. And if someone has a videotape it to the internet, and if the police has received a complaint, it has to follow up according to the procedures. That will depend on the evidence and also the legal requirements. Understood? Then this is a serious question. It's not as easy as you just mentioned. If someone has videotaped the whole process and put on to the internet, you said that the school would usually handle the case, but I think it is just a choice for the school. What if the case is reported to the police? You just told us that the police have to handle the case. In some schools, they may be very strict. Even though students should be educated or taught, the schools may decide to make an example of the student concerned and report the case to the police. What you said is possible, and it may be happening now, and we will follow the established procedure or mechanism. It's now my time. I have a question for Mr. Low Yok Kai. When Mr. Low spoke, he said that the National Anthem Bill might breach the BRO. However, in Germany, for instance, they have also got a national anthem law, and the penalties are quite similar to ours. So, Mr. Low, would you say that the national anthem law of Germany is again the Bill of Rights? Well, when it comes to the Bill of Rights or human rights, it is not about what another country is doing. You can't say that because the boy or that child is naughty, you can also be naughty. Well, there is a UN commission dealing with IPPCR and also HRC. Now, if you tell that committee that another country has also breached the convention, it may ask you to look at how they take that country to task, and you have to understand Article 34 of the ICCPR. No. I think it is very clear. Anyone who, when dealing with flags and emblem, well, my time is limited. Can you please answer my question? I'm not talking about any other country or the national flag. Would you say that the German law is against the human rights principle? That is okay. So we should not learn from them. All right. That ends this session. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay, second round. Mr. Ray Chen, 2 minutes. This is the third session of the day. Whether we talk about people who support or oppose the national anthem bill, they are not very clear about the bill. Even for supporters, their concept is not clear. I have to address the comments that if you're a good student, you need no fear for the school rules. If you're law-abiding, you need not be afraid of the laws. That being the case, why should Mang Chao be so worried? Although some of the deputations have left, in fact, I would like to ask these people through you. Now, do you know that on an occasion where the national anthem is played, and if you do not sing along, have you breached the law? According to the government's response, this is not, because Article 4 is just a guiding provision. There is no penalty there, and law enforcement agencies will have to act according to the law. So, Secretary, if somebody doesn't stand up when the national anthem is played, is it against the law? There is nothing in here to say whether if you don't sing a law is a contravention. Now, the answer is just that it is not considered an insult. All right. If you don't stand up, maybe it's because your legs hurt. But if but what about the law enforcement officers? Will they enforce the law if somebody remains seated?
Now, if someone doesn't stand when the national anthem is played, of course, he's not complying with Clause 4 of the bill. But as I and the Secretary mentioned many times, for Clause 4(2), there is no criminal liability. Okay, I think that's about time. That concludes this session. I would like to thank all members of the public and deputation representatives for coming to the public hearing. So it's now the lunch break, and we'll be resuming our hearing at 2 p.m. today. Thank you.